Okay, good morning and good evening. Today I'm talking about the discourse theory. It is developed by Michael Bakthin. So, discourse theory has been developed in the Nobel by Bakthin. For the first time, discourse theory was developed by Michael Foucault, and later this Michael Bakthin has explore the concept of discourse theory through the Nobel. So, discourse in the Nobel. This is by Bakthin, right? And discourse in the Nobel by Michael Bakthin, right? See, Bakthin's concept of discourse in literary theory focuses on dynamic nature of language and communication. This discourse is nothing. Language is dynamic. It talks about language, and it focuses on the dynamic aspect of language, dynamic nature of language, and communicative aspect of language. He explores how language is not a static system but a living system. He says that language is a living system. It is not static, it is changeable, it is dynamic, evolving process shaped by social interactions. The language is evolved, developed, changing, dynamic through the form of the social interactions. He emphasizes the importance of context, dialogue, and multiple perspectives in the understanding of language. Right? That means context is important for discourse. Without context, there is no discourse to take place. Without context, there is no dialogue that takes place. Without context, there would be no multiple perspectives in the understanding of the language, right? So his discourse theory challenges traditional notions of language as a fixed and formal structure, highlighting its fluid and responsive qualities within the social and cultural context of communication. So language is not always static. It challenges to the fixed formal structure of the traditional concept. Language changes and it highlights fluidity, responsive qualities within the social and cultural context of communications, right? Novel is a form of discourse. It is different. It is a discourse. It incorporates diverse voices, perspectives, and languages. That means multiple voices, different perspectives, different languages of the characters of the different group of the society, people who are using different voices, different forms of discourse, different forms of levels of languages in the different social context that is incorporated through the use of the language of the characters in the novels, right? So this writer argues that novel is a dynamic interplay of different voices in its own social context. It is interplay, it is dynamic interplay of different voices. It is incorporation of different voices in its own social context, right? It challenges the authoritative viewpoints, and it does not say that authoritative viewpoint is everything, challenges it, and it centers around the dynamic interaction of diverse voices and languages. There are diverse voices, diverse forms of languages, structures of languages. The novel can be defined as a diversity of social speech types. It is a social speech, sometimes even diversity of languages and diversity of individual voices, artistically organized. That means discourse. Novel means a kind of discourse, and in it there are diversity of social speeches and diversity of languages, diversity of individual voices, and diversity of thoughts, diversity of perspectives interacted in social context, and it is artistically presented, organized, right? It permits multiplicity of social voices. Novel permits multiplicity of social voices and a wide variety of their links and interrelationships, always more or less in the form of dialogue, right? Such a communication of languages and styles into a higher unity is unknown to traditional stylistics. It has no method for approaching the distinctive social dialogue among languages that is present in the novel. Poetry depersonalizes the language, days in language, right? While prose, as we shall see, often deliberately intensifies the difference between them, gives them embodied representation, and dialogically opposes them to one another in unsolvable dialogues. There would be poetic language, that is depersonal. That is the main function of poetic language, is to depersonalize the ideas, depersonalize the day-to-day languages, and to make it different. Even prose has different differences between the poetry, intensifies differences, and then embodies representation of dialogues, opposes the dialogues, supports the dialogues and to one another, and that is the poetry and prose. Each word test of a context, and context in which it has lived its socially charged, right, life. All words and forms are populated by intentions. They are put there by the intention in poetry and prose. Contextual overtones, that is generic, tendencies, individualistic, are inevitable in the world of poetry and the prose. But the language of novel is different, right? And finally, at any given moment, languages of various epochs and periods of socio-ideological life cohabit with one another, right? Even languages of the day exist. One could say that today's and yesterday's socio-ideological and political day do not, in a certain sense, share the same language. That means political language always changes, right? Day-to-day language changes. Yesterday's political language would be different today. Today's political language would be different tomorrow, because the agendas go on changing, ideologies go on changing. Socio-ideological and political languages used today and would be different tomorrow. Used yesterday is different today, right? So there is always change. Every day represents another socio-ideological, semantic, right, state of affairs. Another vocabulary comes, another accentual system comes with its own slogans, new slogans. If any political events take place today, a new slogan comes with the new event and the old slogan is replaced, right? And even in socio-ideological context, one slogan is replaced by new slogan, old slogan is replaced by new slogan, old thought is replaced by new thoughts, with the change of the society, with the need of the society, with the demand of the society. Its own ways of assigning blame and praise. There would be blame as well as praise. Poetry depersonalizes days in language. That is what I talked already about it, right? Such as they encounter one another and coexist in the consciousness of real people. First and foremost, in the creative consciousness of people who write novels. Novel is a creative consciousness. Novel is, right, first and foremost creative activities, conscious activities. As such, these languages live a real life, right? They struggle and evolve in environment of social heteroglossia. There would be multiple forms of languages. Heteroglossia means multiple types of dialects and forms of languages in the novel that is consciously represented, that is creatively presented. The language and the world of prayer. There would be the language and world of prayers. Language would be different from the world of day-to-day use of language. The language and the world of song. Language of the song and the language of the day-to-day people is different. The language and the world of labor. Language of labor and the day-to-day language is different. Everyday life, language of everyday life is different. The specific language used by the specific purpose is different from day-to-day language. And the world of local authorities and the world of other is different. New language and the world of workers freshly migrated in the city would be different, right? See, all these languages and worlds sooner or later emerged from the state of peaceful and more bound equilibrium and revealed the speech diversity in it. That means, see, language of prayers and the language of the song and the language of the laborers and the language of the specialists, language of the authorities and the language of the migrated people would be different types of dialogues emerging and developing, and those different forms of multiple forms of voices, multiple forms of languages would be incorporated in the novels. If a prayer is a character in the novel and his language is put there, the language of praying. If the worker is there and his levels of language is represented in the novel, if there is a singer and the songs are presented in the form of the language, if authorities get entrance in the novel as a character, and authorities language would be used there. If migrated people are there in the form of characters in the novel, and their language is different because they learned a new language. Workers are if the main characters are there, their language would be just represented in the novel. So it is the novel is the discourse of multiple voices, multiple types of languages, multiple types of characters, multiple types of workers, multiple types of immigrants, multiple types of prayers, multiple types of singers, and others languages would be there incorporated inside the novel in the form of the discourse. So it is a discourse that is found mainly creative, mainly consciously constructed in the novel. And language of discourse of novel is different from the discourse of poetry and the prose. The prose writer as a novelist does not strip away the intention of others from the heteroglot language of his works. He does not violate those socio-ideological cultural horizons, big or little worlds. Big world means within the real world, the writers create their own world that open up behind heteroglot languages. Rather, he welcomes them into his work. Means the writers, the prose writers, welcomes all sorts of languages of the characters in his novel within his own world. The prose writer makes use of words that are already populated in the social intentions of others and compels them to serve his own new intentions, to serve a second master, right? Novel writing differs from epic style, right? Indirect narration style, direct narration style, as the example have been given in with the various texts in text number 1, text number 2, text number 3, examples extracted from the books. These writer Michael Bakthin has brought the examples of example number 1 epic style, another example number 2 text indirect narration style, example number 3 is direct narration style of the novel. That is what is presented in his book. Pseudo-objective motivation is generally characteristic of novel style. That is pseudo-objective. False objectives would be motivation for the in the novel. That means many just ideas are interested there, since it is one of the manifold forms of concealing another's speech in hybrid construction. That means novelists generally try to convince, motivate, encourage the readers to study, and then their reality is almost hidden. Reality is almost kept in the silence, right? So reality may not be always found in the novel, and reality is beautified in through the language. When we then get direct authorial discourse. However, the author gives an objective tone to this aside by suggesting that everybody knew the italicized person is there. It is as if even the author himself did not doubt the fact, and that sort of facts are presented by the novelist in authorial voice, authorial discourse. The distinctive importance of the novel as a genre. How it is different? The human being in the novel is first. People talk about human beings foremost and always a speaking human being. The novel requires speaking persons, bringing with them their own unique ideological discourse, their own languages. So In the noble, there would be no animals, no other things, only the human beings. They would be talking, they would be discussing, they would be bringing their languages, their discourse, their ideological discourses, right? And their own languages from their own backgrounds of their different upbringing is they are presented in the form of the characters in the novel, right? The fundamental conditions that which makes a noble is the speaking person and his discourse. Noble becomes noble not only through the stylistic uniqueness, it is because of the person who is speaking, and his discourse is there, right? Characters are there speaking. But in the poetry, there would be mainly the poet's voice. In prose, there would be writer's voice, right? But in novel, multiple characters are brought there, and through the multiple characters, the writer, novelist, gives the dialogue through their mouths and of their different voices, of their different thoughts. This is consciously, artistically, creatively constructed by the novelist. The topic of a speaking person has enormous importance. That is very important in everyday life, right? In real life, we hear speech about speakers and their discourse at every step. In the same way, we can go so far as to say that in a real life, people talk most of all about what others talk about. Real life people talk about what others people talk about, right? They transmit, they recall, they wait, they pass judgment on other people's words, opinions, assessments, informations. People are upset by others' words or agree with them, contest them, refer to them, and so forth. In everyday language, this is what happens, right? Generally, people talk about other people. Generally, they give about the judgment about others' words, about others' opinions, about others' information, and they just agree or disagree. This sort of informations are there in day-to-day language. This is how the language is used. The same type of discourse is incorporated even in the discourse of novel, with the multiple use of the characters. There are authoritative discourse, right? Discourses and internally persuasive discourse. Generally, author wants to persuade the readers internally. Both authoritative discourse and its internal persuasiveness may be united in single word, one that is simultaneously authoritative and internally persuasive. Despite the profound differences between these two categories of alien discourse, means internal discourse and real authorial discourse. Authorial discourse would be commanding, believing, trusting, as if it is the only one voice or discourse. And internal discourse is always there, hidden, that actually advises to or keeps to persuade the readers. The authoritative word demands that we acknowledge it, we accept it, we believe it, that we make it our own. It binds us, quite independent of any power it might have to persuade us internally. We encounter it with its authority already fused to it, right? We believe it, we trust it, we believe the author, we believe the writer, we trust authorial voice. There would be no doubt. We are attached, we are incorporated, we are joined with the authorial intention, right? Authorial voice. The authoritative word is located in a distance zone, organically connected with the past, that is felt to be hierarchically higher. It is, so to speak, the word of the fathers. If we spend, the father is the person as authority in the house. No one just opposes the father. In the same way, the author, the novelist, is plays just like the role of the father, and readers believe just like the children of a family, and they believe, they trust what the author says. Its authority was already acknowledged in the past. The authority of father is already acknowledged in the past. The authority of the novelist is already acknowledged by the readers while before they are reading the novels, because they have tested the authors, novelists. They have known what sort of ideas the novelist is particular novelist do have. It is a prior discourse. It is therefore not a question of choosing it from among other possible discourses that are its equal. All just authorial discourse or prior discourse, we do not choose, we do not just doubt in it. Therefore, authoritative discourse permits no play with the context framing it, no play with its borders, no gradual and flexible transition, no spontaneously creative stylizing variants on it. It enters our verbal consciousness as a compact and indivisible mass. One must either totally affirm it or totally reject it. Either we have to reject the novel totally, the discourse of the author totally, and we avoid reading the novel, or we completely agree it and then just affirm it, and we go on with reading and obeying what the author had said. And that is authorial voice, right? All these functions determine the uniqueness of authoritative discourse, both as a concrete means for formulating itself during transmission and its distinctive means for being framed by context. It is almost framed, made through the context. It is through the context these voices are made, these discourses are made. The zone of the framing context must likewise be distanced, right? Or no familiar contact is possible here either. The one perceiving and understanding this discourse is a distant descendant. There can be no arguing with him, means with the author, with the authors, with the novelist, right? Authoritative discourse cannot be represented. It is only transmit. We cannot represent, only transmit, because novelists are not there. Novelists write novels and they have the authoritative voice. They just give, they transmit their ideas, and it cannot be represented. There would not be dialogue with them. There would not be two-way communication between the author and the readers, right? For this reason, the authoritative text always remains in the novel a dead quotation, right? It is almost like dead quotation, something that falls out of the artistic context. Sometimes the quotation, whatever the author has given, in which time, in which context, that cannot be suitable, that may not be suitable, that may not be acceptable in the present context, and that may go out of the artistic context, right? Authoritative discourses may embody various contents, authority as such, or the authoritativeness of traditions, of generally acknowledged truths, of the official line, and other similar authorities. That would be just like voice of the authorities. Authoritative discourses would be just like voice of the authorities, voice of authoritativeness, voice of acknowledged truth, voice of official line, like truth. That is authoritative discourse. What first occurs is a separation between internally persuasive discourse and authoritarian, right, enforced discourse, commanding discourse and persuasive discourse. The semantic means meaning, of the structure of internally persuasive discourse is not finite. That is not finite. That is limitless. It is open. In each of the new context that dialogize it, in this discourse is able to reveal ever newer ways to mean, right, new ideas. Discourse has got 4 types, right? Especially discourse have got 4 types. There is F more. Please forget this F sign. 4 types. That is, narration is one discourse, description is another discourse, exposition is another discourse, argumentation is another discourse. So in the novel there would be discourse, there would be description, there would be talk, there would be language, there would be ideas, there would be dialogues, there would be conversation. That is, these are all called discourse. 4 types of discourse: narration, telling a story; description, describing certain events or things; exposition, revealing the facts; argumentation, bringing main idea first and argument first, and then other ideas putting later to support that idea, right? These are the 4 types. He provides a model for a history of discourse and introduces the concept of heteroglossia. Heteroglossia means the reflection of language of various ways of evaluating, conceptualizing, and experiencing the world. Story is a narrative discourse. There is a story. Dialogue is the process of teaching, right? and then the teacher can have communication with or her students in transforming the meaning. So novel is much of capable of achieving the ability to engage what others cannot. See, this is a very good quality. That is a novel. Poetry cannot engage the readers because it is very deep and contemplative and scientific and imaginative ideas there in poetry. And in the same way, prose, it is a little bit complex and readers have to go on thinking upon the images and symbols and how the ideas are presented, because the prose writer, especially essayist, does not have the truth himself and herself, and they would be seeking the truth, and so readers have to do the much effort there. But in novel, what happens? Readers get almost involved, engaged with the ideas, engaged with the conversation, discourse. That is what is being taken place within the multiple characters, with multiple voice, with multiple thoughts, with multiple types of languages, with multiple contexts and multiple communicative approach, with the multiple sociological or ideological concepts and multiple political thoughts, multiple backgrounds of the readers, characters that they would be conversing, they would be discussing, they would be having discourse inside the novel. So readers get engaged with that. So verbal communication, that is quite engaging. That ability is there in the novel. These sort of characteristics cannot be found in others. So discourse is the verbal communication through concrete utterances. It is nothing but verbal communication. Discourse means verbal communication. Discourse means conversation. Discourse means dialogue. Discourse means talk. Discourse means engagement with the dialogue and multiple dialogues. It expresses the ideas and thoughts effectively and understand and interpret the perspectives and opinions of others and build relationship through effective communication. How the communication is possible to have effective right to one another. That is what the discourse. The Michael Foucault himself had said, he who controls the discourse controls the power, right? So power lies in discourse. He who has very convincing, strong opinion, strong, effective discourse, language, communicative style, communicative effective technique, he or she can control the mass with the power of that beauty of the language. That is why discourse is much more powerful. This is how this Michael Bakthin has developed the concept of discourse theory with the novel, and novel is different from others. So discourse is nothing, it is a contextual communication. It is the dynamic process of language. It is the contextual interaction of the society. It is almost multiple voices coming with multiple thoughts and multiple beliefs. This is how this writer has developed the concept of this theory of discourse. Thank you. You can read the slides and get more information and go in the text too. Thank you.